Watching a lot of this Gamergate 2 stuff unfold has been pretty hilarious for me because it's obvious the real gamers are winning this one, and last Gamergate was essentially just kind of a draw, but it did force a lot of the woke agenda underground. But right now they've been losing for so long, they've been trying to reemerge in a last act of desperation in order to try to gain some relevancy, and that's where Gamergate 2 came from. But it's obviously not working for them, and we're seeing either game journalists going out of business, game developers going out of business, or they're pretty much on the verge of doing as much because gamers, once they identify that this is the kind of stuff that they're doing with their properties, they're just universally rejecting it. But that's not stopping other big companies from jumping into the fray, because right now we have Microsoft releasing a report talking about what game developers should be doing in their games in order to try to push this DEI crap that universally gamers have rejected, and doing their part to push the entire medium even further towards the final form of a pile of boring and uninspired mush. Microsoft has released a new product inclusion guide for video game developers, which, in addition to a number of other such recommendations aimed at appeasing the terminally online, notably suggests that creators completely abstain from depicting any sexualized or unrealistic female characters within their works. Now, the depiction of female characters is only a small portion of what Microsoft actually released in their publishing guidelines. I'm going to go into that a little bit further and actually look into some of these studies that they're citing as to why they're actually doing this, but let's continue with this article. Made public on March 20th as part of the company's appearance at the recent 2024 Game Developers Conference, Microsoft's new Gaming for Every Product inclusion framework calls on developers to actively consider 4 specific areas when creating a new title, those being, as per the framework's official website, approachability, representation, globalization, and accessibility. They also provide some little descriptions of what these things actually mean. But in addition to this, they also provided a list of questions that game developers should ask themselves when they're considering making a game. Some of those, are you telling new stories or sharing new perspectives? Do all of your characters' players' depictions look the same? What steps have you taken to ensure characters are represented respectfully? How have you validated assumptions you have made about your audience to check for blind spots or unintended stereotypes? Would you feel proud to show a member of a community how their culture character is depicted within your experience? And you can just see that there's a lot of flaws with some of these questions right here, but just like this last one, for instance, would you feel proud to show a member of a community how their culture character is depicted within your experience? What does that even mean? Like, let's say you have a character, like, let's say a GTA game, you have a black character who's a criminal. Are you saying that this black criminal represents black people? No, that would be racist. And to assume that you see a black character who's behaving as a criminal and saying like, oh, well, they're trying to say all black people are criminals. That's literally the definition of stereotyping, because when you have a character behaving in a certain way in a game, that's not representative of everyone of that race. That's just representing that particular character, because newsflash, people are different. Not everyone in a particular group is a monolith, and people who can't see past skin color don't seem to grasp that. And that's where a lot of this DEI crap comes from. It's coming from racists who are trying to, for the most part, say like, oh, we're not racist because we're representing them in a positive light, but that's still treating them as if they're a monolith, because individuals don't represent their group. Individuals represent the individual, and it's only a racist person who can't see past skin color, because when you see someone who behaves in a certain manner and you assume that they represent their group, that's exactly what racism is, because you're making a broad assumption about a group based off of little information, and the only little information you have is based off of this individual in this game. So if you're trying to say like, oh, well, it's supposed to represent various groups in a positive light or something like that, or it shouldn't represent them negatively, it's like, well, no, then you're just saying basically be overtly racist in your games. This article goes on to highlight some of the other questions that Microsoft has for game developers, but they do have a particular point to mention about how females should be represented in games, and particularly how the characters should be designed. And as a quick aside, this is clearly an attempt to try to masculinize female characters, because there are certain demographics out there who don't look feminine, but they want to look feminine, or they want to look like a female, if you understand what I'm saying on this one. So they're trying to make females in games look more masculine in order to try to blur the lines between what is male and what is female. And a lot of people are noticing this and not buying it. And that's why a lot of people are calling them out and they're saying like, oh, well, you just want to have female characters to jerk off to or something like that. It's like, well, no, that's not what it is. It's just people are calling you out and you don't like the fact that you're being called out. But this article also talks about some of the studies that they were doing and how flawed they were, because Microsoft does cite some of their studies in their publishing about why they're making these decisions. One of the ones right here, a Diamond Lobby study, claims about like how games aren't diverse. It only cites 10 of the highest selling games between 2017 and 2021 and saying like these games aren't diverse, or it's breaking down the diversity in those games, with Apex Legends apparently taking the #1 spot as the most diverse game. Then they also use in other broad assumptions by saying like, oh, well, video games lead to real world violence and things like that, which is obviously not true. If it has been true, it would have been proven by now, because it's not. The most egregious one, I think, and the one I want to look into the most is the new zoo studies. And a lot of these, the problem with them is because they're self-reporting and they get the small sample sizes that are self-reporting for them, and then basically extrapolating that and saying that this equates to all gamers, which is pretty ridiculous. Like this point right here, in their 2022 report, as produced in partnership with the Anti-Defamation League, the organization claims that roughly 12% of respondents reported that they had been on the receiving end of a swatting call. And it points out right here how they say that this study represents 100 million adult gamers within the US. So if 12% of them have reported swatting, they say that would be 19.4 million players have experienced this, which is just a ridiculous claim to make, because you can even look at crime statistics and no, there's not that many incidents of swatting. So it's literally just them getting a small sample size and trying to extrapolate that and saying like, well, there's like 100 million adult gamers in the US. 12% of the people who responded to our polls said that they've been swatted. So that means 12% of game. No, it doesn't work that way. They don't have a good representation of the demographic in order to make such a claim. But if you don't believe me that Microsoft is actually using them as a source for all this, just look at this from their actual site on here. You can see them in their references right here. And this is part of one of their studies, where this is just another example of them having, trying to actually find an answer and looking for the data to support that. Because if you don't know how polling and statistics work, you can basically manipulate them to say whatever you want if you actually do it correctly. Like right here, they say diverse characters. The overwhelming majority of gamers want diverse characters, but it's all a matter of how you actually ask the questions in the polling. For instance, you can say, do you like games that give you a choice of a variety of characters to play as? And if people say yes, then you'd be like, oh, well, according to our study, they like diverse characters, which is like, well, that's technically true, but that's also not the question you're asking them. And we don't know exactly what they're asking because they don't actually publish that. They just kind of publish their results and you can look up their various results. But I also looked up this particular study right here that they have that's talking about diverse characters and diverse stories. That's what people want, because you can look at some of the other data that they published along with this, and you can see where they were kind of getting at, because you see right here, it's the same exact chart. So this is the same study that they published. But look at here, diverse characters, diverse stories, overwhelming majority of gamers want that, right? And that's what they're going with. Well, also keep in mind, this is a company that is trying to overtly push this stuff. That's even in their stated goals. But look at right here. What features are PC and console players interested in engaging with in new games? More diverse characters / creation options. You see what I mean? It's like, why'd you have to conjoin these together? Could it be that the majority of the people want character creation options and you're just also saying that that means diverse characters? Because that's not necessarily the same thing, but they're trying to bundle these together in order to try to paint a picture that people want diversity in video games, and that's not necessarily the case. And we can see that in the results of how people actually buy games, because people aren't buying games that are overtly pushing this type of messaging. They're buying games because they think they look fun or they have good stories. And that's another thing right here, new technology or diverse gameplay. Diverse gameplay is not diversity in the story or anything like that, mind you, but they're trying to conflate the two, recognition of competitive play, strategic play. So these are things that you could broadly call diverse in gameplay, but that's not what they're trying to frame it as. It's just regular standard stuff that gamers want. They just want to have fun games with good stories and interesting characters, and they're trying to paint a picture with that. And the thing is, Microsoft understands that's what they're doing. They're not a stupid company. It took me very little research to actually look. I mean, it literally took me to look into Microsoft's actual source right here that they cited to see that this is what this company is doing. But that's the problem with it, because Microsoft believes what they're doing. So Microsoft is just like them. This company is trying to push an agenda. So they're trying to find the data or make the data to order to support their agenda. Microsoft believes in what this company is doing, so they're trying to use them as a source. And Microsoft is no better, except instead of actually gathering the data themselves, they just outsource it to a company like this. This is kind of like Sweet Baby Inc., where I was saying when that happened that they're not the problem. They're just a symptom of the overall problem. And the overall problem is these companies trying to push diversity and or their forms of diversity into video games and stuff like that. And they're actually hiring people that are agreeing with them in order to try to help them better do that. And getting rid of a company like Sweet Baby Inc. isn't going to actually fix the problem. What you need to do is get rid of the people at these individual studios and individual publishers, pretty much make such a thing a cancer within the industry where people won't want to play a game if it has this type of agenda pushed in it. And it's looking like that's actually working. And as you can see, a lot of these developers who overtly push this stuff have been going under. A lot of these game journalists who've been backing them have been going under. And like I said at the start of this video, what we've been seeing with Gamergate 2 is pretty much their last act of desperation, because you don't get this loud when you're winning. What's the saying go? The stuck pig squeals the loudest. And that's what we're seeing with this. Fortunately, though, these are just suggestions. It's not like Microsoft is saying that game developers have to do this. And it's also a matter of whether individual studios will comply with this. And I'm thinking there's some that will, and they will fail. Other ones won't, and they will succeed. And eventually the free market will fix things. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. If you can, like and share the video because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.